Welcome in to the Just Basketball Show for Monday, October 2nd. I am Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. We have a special guest, dare I say, number one friend of the program, Wes Goldberg's with us to talk about the Miami Heat and do their season preview at the team that didn't make any big trades, which Wes has done really good work covering over at Locked On Heat, and he just sighed deeply about. YouTube views though off the track on Locked On Heat, Wes. Just so you know what, you got some angry people. You got some very angry people in the YouTube comments and being very rational on the internet.
East and West Coast.
But we're going to start with the Jrue Holiday trade. Yeah, tough. All right, start with the Jrue Holiday trade. I hope to Lord someone in the Portland organization has a Jrue Holiday jersey printed for themselves so they can wear it to a festival at some point or sell on eBay under a pseudonym, because he was there for 4 days. He is going to the Boston Celtics in exchange for Robert Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, and some picks. Here's how I want to frame this to start. And Wes, tell me if you think this is accurate or not. I think the Celtics ceiling might have just gotten higher, but I think their floor might be a little lower now.
I think that's really fair, and I think that is the exact thing that the Boston Celtics would tell you too, right? I think that's sort of the bet that they're making. I think they're okay with it. The floor for the last few years has basically been the Eastern Conference Finals, but their ceiling has been pretty clear. You know, they did make the NBA Finals a couple of years ago, but they needed to make some real changes. The Kristaps, trading Marcus Smart for Kristaps Porzingis was kind of just landscape altering enough for them. So to make this deal, they're doubling down, tripling down, however you want to frame it. I love the trade for Boston. I really do. To me, I'm just, if the goal is to win a championship, raise the ceiling. Who cares about the floor? You know, because best case scenario, you win the championship. Worst case scenario, you fail, and it doesn't really matter. It's sort of like if you're not first, you're last, right? What's the difference if they finish second in the Eastern Conference, if they go to the NBA Finals and lose, or if they're a first round and out team? There's no difference between all that stuff as long as you're not winning the championship. So their bet is, hey, we got to go win a championship. We haven't had the stuff to get it done the last few years. Let's go get that stuff to get it done. And if it backfires, it backfires.
I love the way that Brad Stevens has operated since becoming GM here. We know that there's open question if Jaylen Brown is long for this team. Is he finishing the contract extension that he just signed as a member of the Boston Celtics? I think most of us kind of feel like, maybe 55-45 no, right? Because of the second apron and everything else. But I love that they have just continued to tinker around that. Basically, almost every other possible player now has flipped over the past few years. And they basically traded Marcus Smart, Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams, and one first-round pick for Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, right? That's effectively what happened in the course of two transactions, and I think any team in the NBA would do it if you say it that way. I love that Holiday reintroduces an actual ball handler, even though he's maybe not the peak of what that player type can be. We just got done talking about how Milwaukee upgraded in that department, but I think the Celtics needed their own version of an upgrade, and he still is that for them. And obviously they're now really, really, really dependent on Porzingis not only being healthy, which is a question mark, but good, because their front court now turned out from being a major strength with Williams playing a huge part in it to being relying on a 37, 38-year-old Al Horford and a very inconsistent and very irregularly healthy Kristaps Porzingis. So there is a floor here that can maybe fall out for them. But I agree with Wes. It's just, especially for that team, you can't keep playing the margins and trying to kind of nickel and dime your way into a championship. It's throw together a team that if everything hits, you'll just run away with the title. And I think that's kind of on the table for them. If they get a peak season from all these guys, they're going to be incredibly hard to beat on both ends of the floor. So why not?
Get your Defensive Player of the Year votes in now, or the money on Jrue Holiday now, because the Boston media mafia awarded Marcus Smart the Defensive Player of the Year a couple of years ago. Jrue Holiday is light years better of a defender than Marcus Smart is. So it's done, man.
Let me guess, Wes. Should Bam have won that award? Is that maybe where you're going? What's funny is I actually can't even. I have to sit that argument out because a lot of Suns fans would say McHale should have won it because he was second that year, and I don't think so. So I think big men should win that award.
You're just saving all your ammo for the Yusuf Nurkic DPOY campaign this year, right? That's where this was.
Well, it is sort of interesting that both Phoenix and
right.
Boston basically punted on centers. They're just like, you know what, we don't even care. And so I think Boston can still do the buyout thing this year, right? It'll be next year where they can't really add anybody on the buyout market. So there's always centers out there. Dwight Howard's available and raising his hand to anybody that will look in his direction. So
he's also just like in Taiwan, like Instagramming every little thing that he's doing over there. And
all
I'm just
of the
like,
money
this
that
guy
I have that he ends up on either Phoenix or Boston by the end of the season. Like it has to happen. It's already there. It looks like it's perfect. Boston can always circle back to Blake Griffin too, but I don't think they'll do that. So I don't know. I love when people just go for it. And they're just going for it, you know? And look, we'll see what happens with Kristaps Porzingis. Al Horford will give you 20 good regular season games, and maybe he shows up for half the playoff games. Maybe that's all they need from him. Like, it's enough. They'll figure it out.
The other thing I think that's really interesting to think about with Boston is you go back to the Ime Udoka season. That was their strength that season was the defense. That was the path for them becoming on that ascent that year. That defense is now just like it's gone. Like any version of like what they could run that season, just like you can't do that with this personnel now. It's
Grant's
over.
gone too, who we haven't even mentioned.
Yeah, Grant's gone. You have Porzingis can't switch. I don't think you really want Horford switching a ton, maybe in emergencies, but like you're not going to design your scheme around Al Horford switching.
No, they're gonna suddenly be throwing out like a ton of zone and just really look like entirely different.
Because I guess it was going to be Porzingis and Robert Williams, I think was sort of the projected starting lineup there. Now, obviously, one of those guys are gone. Do you just go small? Is it just Jaylen Brown and Tatum at the forward spots, and then you got Jrue Holiday and Derek White, probably, with Porzingis at center? So you could basically just run the Milwaukee defense,
probably,
but have Porzingis play the Brook Lopez role, is what I would think. And then you have Jrue Holiday and Derek White just fighting over literally every screen and funneling all those ball handlers towards Porzingis. I think it's going to be a lot of that.
The Milwaukee defense with no Giannis as a help defender.
So asking
right?
a lot of
that's
it's asking a lot
part.
of Jalen and Jason Tatum, right? And that's sort of also the bet that Boston has made is like, hey guys, we love you. You guys have been great. We need more. We need more from a leadership role. We need more on the defensive end, more consistently, and whatever. The regular season is the regular season. All this is about the playoffs. That's what all this stuff is about, is the playoffs. And you look at a guy like Jrue Holiday too. If you think that you're going to end up meeting Milwaukee for a round, he's a great guy to guard Dame. So I think that helps.
And Chris, I think we should hit on Portland, but I think this moment for a team like the Celtics is always like one of my favorite things from a roster building standpoint in sports. Like you think of the kind of what the Chiefs have had to go through recently, the Seahawks before that, you could go Patriots in football. It's a little more logical in football because I think players move less and the quarterback pay stuff obviously dictates a lot of it. But that moment when it's like, you go from having an embarrassment of riches on your roster for whatever reason, you luck out with some draft picks, you get a cheap quarterback, you do whatever, to all of a sudden it's like, all right, like the QB in that sport has to do more with way less. And the greatest players just kind of figure that out. Like LeBron can win a championship with Wade and Bosh, or he can win a championship with various versions of less than that, right? Like, and so I think it's a cool kind of inflection point for them. But of course, like I don't want to make it seem like Porzingis and Holiday and Derek White and on are like some sort of huge downgrade. But I think it's correct to say like, all right, like if we're gonna win a championship, like you got to at least get close to Nikola Jokic or Devin Booker or Kevin Durant or whoever you want to say, Luka Doncic. Like that's who you are. Then like that's who you are. But the Portland side I'm fascinated by, and I kind of, it's like hard to stay on the court with them. I guess maybe the transition point is
there's no interest to them on the court. The interest is what other assets can they get for Rob, assuming they want to trade Rob. And what
I think they should keep Robert Williams. That's exactly where I was about to go. I think if that guy can ever stay healthy, I think there is a massive ceiling that has not been reached for him. I think he is way better than Joe Mazzulla seems to think he is, and I feel like there is a lot more to his game. Obviously, I know the health thing is a massive caveat, but as a passer, as a switch defender on the perimeter more than just being a rim protector, obviously the roll man scoring stuff is there. But like I would keep him if I'm the Blazers, even if he's just your backup to Ayton and maybe they play together a little bit. I would just keep him because I think he's good enough that you might be selling a little low right now, if I'm being honest.
He's got 3 more years on his contract at a really, really good number. He's only 25, I think. He'll be 26. And then, there's no reason to trade him. But then again, like if it's at around the trade deadline and there's a contender in need of a center and they're offering a first-round pick, if you're Portland, I think you at least have to have a meeting about it. What do you guys think about the return overall? Obviously, I'm very close to this, but
I have a line prepared for this that's going to trigger you.
Give it to us.
This was way better. They did way better here than anything that Miami could have ever given them. This is just significantly better than anything Miami was going to give them. It's not even close.
I thought the same thing at first, and then I started digging into it a little bit more. And look, we have no idea. First of all, I just want to point this out. This is the only superstar trade in the history of any sport where we compare it, the success of the trade, to a hypothetical offer that we're not even really sure ever happened. Like, we're not judging this as if this is fair value for Damian Lillard. We're not. Nobody is judging it that way.
Yeah.
Nobody. Literally nobody.
Well, and Aaron Goodwin's out here doing like ops for the Heat front office, being like, they definitely tried to get him, and it's like, we're never going to see anything like this again. Like, honestly, we're never going to see anything like this again.
Portland fans don't even care if the return is good. They just care that the return is not from Miami. Like that, and I think the Trailblazers front office thinks the same thing. Anyway, the point being, I think the offer is actually pretty comparable. Once again, we don't know what was actually reported, but now after, or what was actually real, but reported afterwards, that the Heat were willing to include 3 first-round picks, some good players, and some young players, right? And basically, and maybe flip Tyler Hero to a third team, et cetera. And that they could have gotten DeAndre Ayton could have been part of this deal no matter what. So I'm just gonna, by default, DeAndre Ayton heads to Portland, and regardless if Miami or it's Milwaukee, whatever. But okay, Portland right now has 3 first-round picks and Robert Williams in return for Damian Lillard, right? It's basically what they have. If you separate the DeAndre Ayton thing out.
Okay.
Sure. Okay. Miami was prepared to offer 3 first-round picks and like Nikola Jovic.
And whatever they get for Brogdon. I think that has to be
I will be very surprised if
maybe
they get
another
anything
pick
of value for Brogdon. Brogdon is one of those guys that the internet loves, and like the actual NBA has already spoken. Like, nobody likes him. I'm not even trying to be mean.
So he's
like,
I think that's fair.
Is he Landry Shamet but with like better rep?
He's Landry Shamet but plays less. You know, like he's just, that's basically his whole thing. Seems like a nice guy. But look, if Miami was going to offer 3 first-round picks and Nikola Jovic, what we're really talking about is, would you rather have Nikola Jovic on a rookie scale contract or Robert Williams on this deal? And look, I that's up to debate. I think either side could be fair. It just depends on what you think of Jovic, who's a complete unknown, or what you think about Robert Williams, who's obviously older, on a second contract, and has injury problems. I would probably honestly lean Robert Williams. I'd rather have him. But it just sort of depends. But if that's what you're really splitting hairs by, I think the offers are just comparable.
Well,
and if you just would have done it with Miami, it would have just been faster.
So what I think the distinction is how you feel about the Celtics and Bucks picks that they did get.
They're worse than the Miami picks. They are.
You think so?
I mean, you get a 2024 Warriors pick from Boston, which is not going to be worth a whole lot.
Yeah, that one I don't think matters.
The future Boston picks
aren't. The Celtics' own pick and the Bucks' own pick.
And the Bucks' own pick could be worth something. That's the most of the 3. That's the one that with the most variance, right? That Boston pick's going to be like 23 or something. Like, it just is. Like,
because Tatum will be there.
They're going to be good, you know? So the Miami picks, that's like a bet on Miami tanking, or not tanking, I should say, but like post Jimmy Butler not being good. And there's this idea out there that the Heat are always good. And I'm like, yo, they were in the lottery 3 years in a row after the big 3. That's why there's Bam and Tyler Hero on that team. They're not like not allowed to be in the lottery. There's not some like weird NBA rule that the Heat aren't allowed to pick in the lottery. They pick in the lottery like all the time, actually. It's not that rare. So, yeah, I just like once Jimmy Butler's gone, and then obviously if it was this hypothetical Damian Lillard older and gone, those picks could have definitely been worth something. So I don't know that there's enough to me looking at those picks where I'm like, oh yeah, no, those picks were definitely more valuable than those picks. It's a crapshoot. It's going to be completely random.
Yeah, I think the other part would just be, could it have worked with Ayton on the Heat side? Like as a person who is vested in the Suns, giving me what I've never gotten from them. Like I think that's a better player than Nasir Little, of course.
Caleb Martin or Grayson Allen?
Yeah, Caleb Martin for sure. So yeah, but I guess that is a little bit of an if. But the question I wanted to pose to you guys that's a little bit bigger picture is like, I agree the package was better, but it's a little bit of a crazy state of affairs when a GM feels like he is like trying to upend an era of NBA player movement. That's kind of an insane thing to have happen, that somehow the person occupying one of the sides of a negotiation is like trying to take some sort of like big picture social statement stand against, the culture of the NBA. Like that's pretty insane. And I was really ready to bash him for it if he hadn't gotten a good package. But I guess now that he did, it's sort of like two birds with one stone. Maybe he did finally, prove his point and all that stuff, and got his team set up pretty well. But yeah, so I was laughing at Sean Marks all last summer, and then he kind of got a good package too. So maybe these guys are onto something. Even though Durant went where he wanted, they definitely coaxed everything they possibly could out of the Suns in a similar situation. So I don't know. Maybe the patience side of it is a couple W's in a row here for those guys.
This is like being like anti-toll booth. Like, I'm just not going to pay highway tolls, and so you just take side streets. You kind of get to the place you're going to go, but it just takes a while longer. And at the end, you're like, I showed you toll booth. Mm-hmm. That's basically what Joe Cronin just did. He got what he was going to get for Damian Lillard from Miami if he actually went into negotiations. But so, like, credit to him, man. And you took the stand, and now you are like the hero of all small market GMs, and you've basically saved your job because it looks like you haven't caved, even though you basically got the same return that you would have gotten in the first place. So, dude, like, clapping, like, congrats. Like, you just saved your job. That's great for you. The whole anti-player empowerment thing is really interesting, though, because if you do zoom out, I think this is good for the NBA, right? I think it is. Like, because you look at the Ben Simmons thing, he lost reportedly, I can't remember who reported it, $20 million for just not playing. And he was trying to get all the money back. And they were like, dude, you didn't show up to work. You don't get to have all your money back. You're going to lose 20 mil. And that's what happened. You look at the James Harden situation, how it's playing out with Daryl Morey right now. He's sort of taking a very similar stand, right?
He's out of Wiggles. James Harden is out of Wiggles, to quote
Kevin
Kevin Garnett.
Wiggles. It's great. You know what? He doesn't seem that wiggly to me. Just like
Harden? No. He's interested in other people wiggling in his vicinity.
He's into Wiggles. He doesn't want to do the Wiggles, right? So,
no, he's interested in throwing singles.
He's
for
more
Wiggles.
single for Wiggles. That's pretty good. It is, but it is. I think there's this sort of shift going against player empowerment, because remember, guys, we all remember the line, "Oh, you don't want to piss off stars. Other stars in the NBA are watching." That always came from agents. Like, "Hey, my stars are watching." And it's like, you know what? The stars don't really care. The stars are going to just do whatever the stars want to do. Mm-hmm. And we learned that when LeBron went back to Cleveland, right after the owner with the Comic Sans letter. He was like, I don't really care. I don't really care because this is where I want to play, and I don't really care that the owner is being a bleep hole. Like, I just don't care. I'm just going to play where I want to play, and it doesn't matter to me. So yeah, there's this whole there used to be that idea, and it feels like now front offices are like, you know what, we're just going to do what's right for the organization, because we can't bet that any star is going to feel one way or the other about our organization at some random point that maybe this player wants to come here. It never really made sense in the first place. I never really bought it in the first place, honestly. So I think it's good for the NBA, because I do think it was getting out of hand. I do. And it's a little bit of a market correction.
Well, if I want to project this forward for a second, one of the next possible stars that could want out is Donovan Mitchell, right? He could in a year be like, I'm not signing an extension. I'm going to hit free agency. The Cavs might feel obligated to trade him. If you're Kobe Altman at that point, you absolutely can't just acquiesce to him for fear of pissing off his agent, because you also have to look Darius Garland, Evan Mobley in the face and be like, hey, I'm helping you guys to win, even though Donovan wanted out. There's going to be other situations like that. Now, Philly might be different. Obviously, Portland is just worried about its future in a big way, and maybe also catering to its fan base. But there's going to be situations where these teams have to make trades, and they have to look the players that are still around and being like, we're not abandoning you. If the Knicks want to do something, they have to look Jalen Brunson in the face and be like, there's a bigger plan here. There is going to be a balancing act that I think it's going to be interesting to see how these people. Could
they just not trade Donovan Mitchell, even if he tells them, hey, I'm not going to sign the extension? Cleveland's good. Why would you just punt on a year where you can maybe go to the finals or get to the Eastern Conference Finals just because you're afraid Donovan Mitchell is going to leave? When you're instead of trading him, just hey,
I
just
agree.
If you want to leave, man. You're a free agent, but we're gonna give us your all for this year. There is an argument to be made that the value in just having Donovan Mitchell for one more year is greater than what you could get for him in a trade. Again, it just depends on what sort of packages are coming back, and that would be up to the front office to kind of figure out. But I wouldn't just in Sharpie be like, yeah, we have to trade Donovan Mitchell if he doesn't sign the extension.
Yeah, I think to me it just kind of circles back on we're kind of developing what the baseline of who you have to capitulate to is, and in what circumstances you might have to capitulate, right?
It's higher than Jay Crowder. We know that.
Lillard. It's higher than Jay Crowder. It's like Lillard was unique, and I think that public perception did go against him because of the stubbornness that Aaron Goodwin was displaying, because of the unseemliness that Durant had to deal with, of like the whole, he signed his extension and he didn't have to, and of course now he wants out. And like, I don't really love that fully, but okay, like I guess it has seemed to work against those guys. I think Lillard as a person and as his stature in the NBA is past that baseline, but I think maybe some of those circumstances worked against him. But, you know, like, I think Joel Embiid will be an interesting case study. Is he somebody that one, because of Daryl Morey, but two, because if he does eventually ask out and whatever the situation ends up being there, it's like, do teams feel like it's going to burn bridges around the NBA to, like, quote unquote disrespect Joel Embiid by being the team to trade for him when he didn't ask to come there, or by the Sixers getting rid of him? And I don't know that answer. I think Durant is above that line. Like, it's Kevin Durant. He's a legend. Like, if you do wrong by him, quote unquote, in some kind of way, like, I do think that will be held against you. But like, is Donovan Mitchell above that line? I don't think Donovan Mitchell's above that line. So like, our players going to be like, oh, they did Spida dirty. No, I don't really think so, right? Like, I think he's probably not there. So maybe that's part of what's happening too. But yeah, I guess we're probably ready to talk Heat, Chris, I think, from a time standpoint.
Yeah, let's move on to talk about the one Miami Heat, who a team that, again, has stayed pat. They get Tyler Hero back from injury, and that's where I want to start with this. I do just want to say, I kind of think that Tyler Hero might be the most important player on this team this year, because they didn't trade him. They need him to do something important for this team to recreate some of the success, and he's the one variable they didn't have for much of last season. And I think he also is someone that's probably going to come in based on his tweets and based on just what I kind of feel like I know about here. I think he's going to come in with an edge, and I think he's the answer for this.
Yeah, he's got like the biggest chip on his shoulder right now. He has been dangled in trade talks for now at least 2 summers. The Heat front office went out of their way, Pat Riley specifically, in his annual end-of-season press conference in June, went out of his way to call Tyler Hero basically a franchise building block. And I found that very interesting at the time. And the way I read it at the time was, he is protecting Tyler Hero. People are like, oh, he's just talking him up for other rival front offices. Like, what front office is going to be like, oh, he's calling him a building block now? I completely changed my opinion about Tyler Hero. Like, no front office acts like that. I think he was doing it for Tyler Hero. Like, that's who he was talking to in that press conference. Knowing that very well, that they could dangle him in trade talks, but if it didn't work out, that he wanted to have that out there in the public. Like, that entire Pat Riley press conference was hedging in the case that the Damian Lillard trade did not get done. And we see now why, because they couldn't get the deal done. So I think Tyler Hero's whole thing is fascinating. I do expect him to come. People are wondering if he's going to come back and if he's going to play hard and all these things. Like, I'm with you, Chris. I think he's going to come back and he's just be like, if you don't want me, somebody's going to want me, and I'm just going to show up everybody. And by the way, I'm making $20 million this year, so F you. Like, it's just, he's just so used to it now, you know, and I think that does sort of fuel him. And, you know, the locker room wasn't trying to trade him. You know what I mean? Like, Eric Spoelstra necessarily was not trying to trade him. Like you could still be in there and just be like, hey, management sucks, but we're all in this together, employees. You know what I mean? So I think it'll be fine.
I also don't think those players are going to, like, let him take,
no way.
Like, F around.
Yeah, he'll get benched.
Right?
I mean, he literally, like, if he just, like, stops playing defense or something, like, he'll just get benched, and that'll be it.
I do think, too, guys know, like, kind of the hierarchy of things, and it's like, it's one thing if you're being dangled in trade talks for, like, I don't know, even Jrue Holiday, right, you know, but it's like, it's Damian Lillard, you know, like, I think Tyler Hero would do that trade, even if it sucks to deal with. I think, too, to your guys' point, like, Miami has a certain tolerance for allowing that stuff to become a problem, and it's like, even if they kind of created the problem, they're going to expect everybody to go right back to business, I think. So he's not maybe going to have the luxury of figuring it out. But so my question with him, though, his numbers have been, like, I think he's just a really good offensive player, like, period. And I think he provides a little bit more in terms, like, he can stay out there and be part of a good team defense. He's shown that. I think, you know, his size, he rebounds, like, he affects the game in some other ways. His offensive game has rounded out, I think, you know. But my question would be, he is 23 he'll turn 24 this year. What's the way that his game moves forward from here? I think that's, to me, like, aside from just, okay, do it in the playoffs, which is a little bit of a real reasonable thing to ask of him, because I think he has had a little bit of a dip when the postseason comes around. So that's one aspect. But Wes, what do you think is like the next step for him if he's going to improve as a player, become like that bona fide franchise building block, earn his full, contract and be plus value on his deal, whatever way you want to look at it?
Running pick and roll. That's where it is for him. The Miami Heat's problem, I know they made the finals run last year, but they won 44 games in the regular season, and the regular season sucked. Like, it was super frustrating to watch that offense because the Kyle Lowry thing, we know this with older players. Once it happens, and he just wasn't the same guy anymore, and it became very apparent that he couldn't even start for that team, and obviously he had that long 2-month injury. So they had to start shifting their offense around. And what ended up being their best source of offense was Jimmy Butler. And it's always been their best source of offense. The problem is you can't just ask Jimmy Butler to do that in the regular season and carry that offense because you need him to do it in the postseason. And he's old and he's got the wear and tear on the tires and things like that. So you have to preserve him. So the entire year you had your really efficient version of offense just standing there in Jimmy Butler, but you didn't want to overdo it. So they were trying to find this new version of innings to eat up. What's our offense that we can just use to sustain us through the regular season? They ended up on the Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo pick and roll. And the problem with that is it was only okay. It wasn't a great source of offense, per possession. There wasn't totally great efficiency numbers. It wasn't like Embiid and Harden, right? It was fine. It wasn't bad. It wasn't good. It was just fine. And so Miami's highest usage version of offense was not their most efficient offense. And it was just sort of a strange place for them to be in. So that's why for Tyler, it would just be, okay, pick that up. Because we know it's not Bam's problem, right? He might be the best screen setter in the NBA. He's a tremendous roller. He can finish above the rim. He developed that little midi shot and all those things. Tyler Hero just has to get better at finding the pockets, finding all that stuff, running that pick and roll, finding the cadence, picking his own spots to score out of that pick and roll set. That's what it all comes down to, because if he can be sort of a rinse and repeat pick and roll ball handler, that changes everything. That changes everything for the Miami Heat, because everything basically just snaps into place.
Do you have is your answer Tyler Hero, Brendan? Just to be sure.
Yeah, I had Hero too. I mean, I think we should mention Jimmy Butler, who had statistically one of his better seasons ever in the regular season last year. But when I tried to think about, okay, what happens if he's not as available, if he's not quite as efficient on, and it's like, well, the next place you have to look is you would expect Hero to pick up that slack. So I just landed on Hero for that reason. But it'll be interesting to watch him this year, I think, for narrative reasons, but also as a basketball player.
Yes. All right, let's move on. Talk about player we're going to be talking about at the end of the season. Wes, who are you going with for this answer?
So I was trying to figure out, you guys sent me the questions beforehand, and I was like, okay, what's the spirit of this question? Because obviously we'll be talking about Jimmy Butler, because he's actually going to be eligible for an extension next summer, so we'll be talking about that. We're always talking about Bam Adebayo and why he got snubbed for Defensive Player of the Year. And so, but I wanted to avoid the obvious ones, and Tyler Hero included. So I'm going Haywood Highsmith. I think he's a really good player. I think defensively, he might be one of Miami's best 4 defenders, right now. Offensively, he's basically a 0. But they have him watching film on PJ Tucker for the last 2 years, and they've been working on his corner 3 a lot. And he only made the corner 3 last year at a 31% clip. If he can get that higher up to 37, 38%, where it's a legit weapon, he could go from maybe fringe rotation guy to potentially starting at power forward. That's what we're talking about in terms of the variance on Haywood Highsmith this year. And I'm going to bet on it. I like it. They keep him. The Heat will just cut bait if they don't think you got it. And they've kept him around now for 3 years for a reason, right? And so I'm very much looking forward to seeing if Haywood Highsmith, especially in training camp this week in Boca Raton, if the reporting out of training camp is, oh yeah, that 3 is here, and this dude is legitimately competing with Kevin Love to maybe even start the regular season as their starting power forward, I think that's totally in the cards for him.
Chris, you're our resident Midwesterner here. Do you know about Wheeling, West Virginia?
Do I know about Wheeling, West Virginia? It was near where I went to college in beautiful Athens, Ohio.
Is that a Jesuit school?
And the Wheeling is Wheeling is a Jesuit school. One of the best athletes of my rough time at where I went to high school went and played Division III basketball at Wheeling.
Is his name Haywood Highsmith?
Unfortunately not.
Haywood Highsmith is the only NBA player ever to come from that university, which is not exactly a surprise considering I didn't know that city existed until I clicked on the university next to his name on Basketball Reference. But yeah, that is the spirit of the question, Wes. That is kind of what we try to hit on. Although sometimes, it's like this guy's going to get traded or whatever. It's kind of inevitable. But I had Nikola Jovic, not exactly an under-the-radar person because of the trade talks. But, when you just look at the fact, he was a fairly well-regarded prospect in the first place. And then he went out at the FIBA tournament and shot 42% from three, 57% overall, and had, nearly 3 assists to 1 turnover on a team that won the second place in the whole thing. Like that is about as solid as you could ask for somebody who I think kind of outplayed what I would have expected even his role to be on that team, let alone actually producing within that role. So he really has kind of leapt up in my expectations. I think the obvious other one would be Hawkes, but Jovic has played in more games and, going into his second season. And then to your point about Love and Highsmith and whatever, a little bit more of a pathway to like, if he really hits, then they need that. Like they need kind of help at that spot, maybe more so than wing. So I think that all kind of coalesced for me to pick Jovic. And I mean, do you think he'll play? Like, is he going to be playing minutes opening night, or where is he in the pecking order?
I think he's going to play. I think it really helped that Eric Spoelstra was also a part of the FIBA World Cup and got to see Jovic up close and in person during the tournament. I know that they had several like meals together during the tournament as well. So I think they got closer in a way that they weren't able to during Jovic's rookie year where he was mostly hurt. He could start too. We're talking about people who could start power forward. It wouldn't surprise me if by end of the year he was starting at power forward for them. Like his feel for the game is so advanced. He's just so young and he plays really young. It's like the decision-making part is sometimes questionable, but I was really impressed with what he did in FIBA because he just played a role that was much closer to what the Heat are asking him to do than what he used to do in international ball, where he was kind of a lead ball handler for his teams growing up. And this was much more of like all those threes that you're talking about, Brendan, were like catch and shoot threes. Like all of them were catch and shoot threes. That's going to be much more in line with what he's doing at the NBA level. So I think it could be a really good year for Jovic. He might even be better than Robert Williams.
Chris?
Ooh, like that take. Love this place, Wes. My answer is whichever one of Haywood Highsmith and Jovic actually asserts themselves. It's like that's the answer. Like that. Like Kevin Love is a Hall of Famer. I think he was great for them and really useful for them. Almost like he could have helped a team that made the playoffs.
Or his old teammate James Jones, who we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But like, there's clearly a need for like a little more athleticism, just a little more juice, maybe just a little more like can go every night full go. And like if one of those guys ascends, that's like it's the cheeky answer that I thought about getting, but I'm just gonna say just to see is like whatever guy in Sioux Falls we've never heard of that's like hitting 45% from three in January. That's the other answer here.
Yeah, Cole Swider, watch out for him.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, just someone who's just like, I saw that guy play one college game randomly during the tournament, never thought of him again, and now he's like a starter for the Miami Heat.
Could always be that.
Yeah. Yes. All right, best case.
Lineup. No, best lineup.
Sorry, best lineup. Excuse me. I'm getting ahead of myself.
What do you got, Wes?
What's the best lineup from last year? What is the best lineup?
The best lineup from last year, which we like to do first. So high volume best lineup from last season was Vincent Hero, Martin Butler, Adebayo. If you want to take Hero out of it, I guess it would be Lowry, Strus, Martin Butler, Adebayo. If just, I think that would probably be different for the playoffs. I didn't pull that, but that's kind of what we're talking about. So what did you have?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Tyler Hero because I think a lot of people are sort of surprised by the fact that a lot of Miami's best lineups included Tyler Hero last year, the high volume lineups. I think the best lineup this year is going to be Tyler Hero, Josh Richardson, Caleb Martin, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. That's 4 very high-end defenders and Tyler Hero, right? So you got 4 defenders to sort of cover up for his deficiencies. And then you have some legit scoring between, obviously, Jimmy, Tyler Hero, and if it's a good Caleb Martin night, then also Caleb Martin. And then Bam, obviously, who averaged 20 points per game last year. So, I think that lineup's going to be really strong for them. I don't think that'll be the starting lineup for them. I would probably pencil in Kevin Love as the power forward and probably Josh Richardson at the 2 with Caleb Martin still coming off the bench. But that's going to be a lineup that they get to probably in every half, I would expect. Maybe even to end each half would be, again, Tyler Hero at sort of quote unquote point guard, Josh Richardson, Jimmy Butler, Caleb Martin, and Bam Adebayo.
Yeah, I had the same thing, and I actually was thinking that it would start, but your read on it, I'm sure, is better, and they did start Love in the playoffs, so you're probably right. But I like that as their closing lineup, and it's the best kind of two-way thing I think you can cobble together here. The best playoff lineup, just to say it, was Lowry, Duncan Robinson, Martin, Butler, Adebayo, which is just hilarious. But what did you have, Chris?
I have the same as Wes. I think this is pretty straightforward. I think there will be some lineups that just end up popping in ways we don't expect. I'm curious just to see, how they replace Strus, how they replace some of the things that have gone. I think there's some of the numbers when you look at them from their laps this year do have some weirdness to them. Like Victor Oladipo is just randomly in a bunch of their most used lineups last year, and obviously he got hurt and it's gone now. But I really just kind of think it's the core of this team. It's going to just be it's going to be Jimmy and Bam, obviously. I think Hero's that third peg on this version of that team, and then it's what other two pieces click in whatever way. Is it Jovic? Is it Highsmith? Is it is it Caleb? I've been confusing wings all night. Is it Kevin Love? Is
they
it
like Hakas too? They
pick
like
someone
Hakas
else
a lot.
Yeah, is it Haka, who was good in summer league? Just someone just ascend in a way that is just sure. And I mean, I still wouldn't count out that there's the fifth starter on this team.
Right.
Is someone they trade for in
I would be very
3 months.
surprised if the roster right now is the roster that is there post-trade deadline, right? I think this team has to make a move, and they might have to make a move sooner rather than later, given the moves that their rivals in the East have already made recently. So we'll see. But I think, generally speaking, this team is already deeper than last year. I know that they lost Gabe Vincent and Max Strus, but you added Josh Richardson. You basically replaced Max Strus with Josh Richardson, which I think is pretty even. I think that's just a one-for-one almost replacement. You do lose Gabe Vincent, and that's tough because you don't really have a real other point. The only real point guard on the roster is Lowry. I think they're going to continue to bring him off the bench. That was his best stretch last season, was kind of managing his minutes in that way. But with Jovic being healthy, with adding Jaquez, Haywood Highsmith ready to probably take another leap, and all these guys, fire alarm. I think they're a little bit deeper than they were last season.
The best case that I had revolves around trades as well. I think, to me, Chris, I don't see a lot of upside that Lowry and Duncan Robinson are going to pull magic out of their hat, rabbit out of their hat one more time. So those guys being traded feels like a closer pathway to hitting the highest of upsides. I don't think it's out of the question that both Highsmith and Jovic hit, and maybe they have to if they consolidate some of these players. So I look at all of that and just come to the conclusion that a best case scenario is that they stay afloat, consolidate into one more starting caliber, if not a little better than that, good starter caliber player at some point this season. And by the end of April, or by April, they're better than what we're talking about them being right now. But I don't know who that is. I don't really know what that all looks like, but that kind of feels like the best case. Because otherwise, if I'm just going based on this roster, probably pretty similar to last year, honestly. Can they get the 6th seed?
Yeah, that would be the goal, I think.
Yeah. I think avoiding the play-in with this roster would be a great goal for them, and I think there's a window there. The other thing I would add is I think the best version of this team is going to involve the best defensive season we've ever seen from a guy we haven't talked about, and that's Bam Adebayo, who, if I had to pick today, I might pick him for Defensive Player of the Year. I think he's good enough where he is just going to win one at some point, and it's why not now? And why can't that guy be the anchor of what this team is? I think this team is, Wes, tell me if you think this is wrong, but I think there is a little bit of, you got to take some of the responsibility to drag this team off of Jimmy's shoulders and he's 34. At some point you do need more, and Bam is the obvious guy to do that, I think, especially defensively, tone setting wise, and I think a little bit more offensively if you can get it. But I do think
I think the offense. I mean, how much more can the dude do on defense? He's like maybe the most versatile, best defender in the NBA.
I want him to get rewarded. I think he just like is one of those guys that like I should have Defensive Player of the Year winner like next to his CV on his CV. Let's get it to him.
It's crazy that he didn't win it 2 years ago. But I do think like the thing with Bam is he is. You're right. Like he's sort of just by default the guy that has to take some of that the scoring responsibility off of Jimmy Butler, and his reputation because of that has suffered a little bit. There's like a lot of people are like, oh, why can't he dominate and be like this 25 point per game scorer? Meanwhile, he is literally elite at his position at literally everything else. Like he is an elite passer at his position. You know, if you don't count Jokic because throwing off the scale, like. He's an elite passer at his position. He is an elite screen setter at his position. I think he's the best defensive player in the NBA, so he's an elite defender at his position. Like he is elite at everything. Even his rebounding numbers, like the raw like per game numbers aren't great, but his percentage numbers are amazing. Like the Heat's rebounding percentage when he's on the court are great because guess what? He also had the most box outs in the NBA last year for a star, and he's doing that kind of thing. So he's so elite at everything, and he's pretty good as an offensive player, but he's not elite as just a scorer, right? And unfortunately, the Heat are asking him to also be like, hey, all this stuff that you're elite at, can you also be a 25 point per game scorer for us? And that is so hard. That's basically you're asking him to be Jokic. You're asking him to be Giannis. You're asking him to be Embiid. And there's just like not a lot of those kinds of guys. Yeah. So it would have been great if they could have gotten Damian Lillard. And then all of a sudden you're asking him to do a lot less of that kind of stuff. And you can just lean into being elite at all those things. But they do, Chris, to your point, they just kind of need him to do it anyway. It sucks. Like, hey, I'm sorry we have to ask for you to do this, but you're also kind of the only guy that can do this, which is why, again, I go back to the Tyler Hero Bam pick and roll. If you can kind of like spread some of that responsibility into a 2-man game instead of just like Bam, hey, can you get to the free throw line and hit a 15-footer like every other possession? It's just a little bit easier on Bam for that reason. So, but I'm with you. He's got to win Defensive Player of the Year at some point. I think he's an awesome player, and I think if you look at the Heat, they have 2 top 20 players in the NBA. I put Bam up there, and it's just like, where does the third guy rank? And then what's the difference between the third and the fourth guy? Like they have 2 legitimately elite players. But if you were to do like when NBA rank comes out, like I'll be really interested to see like where does Tyler Hero come in? Is he their third best player? Are they going to put Caleb Martin as their third best player? Like I don't know. And is that like the 82nd best player? Yeah. That's just not going to be good enough,
Yeah. So the over under number is 46.5, which feels super high. This team in the regular season last year was 41 win team statistically, 44 win team in the standings. And again, with what they got from Butler, the fact that they didn't add a huge piece, I just have a hard time seeing the path to the over unless you're telling me that there is some unforeseen trade, which I think Heat fans will pull their hair out if we talk too much about that again. But so I don't know. I'm going under. I have a hard time making the case for the over.
Chris, I want to hear what you have to say before I do my thing.
I lean under just because I think there's a lot of like proof. All the posturing about the Dame trade, all of the indications about what this team believes in itself, and the fact that like Jimmy's going to miss some time.
Yep.
I just think they're probably going to be like we're the 6th seed and then get like the Knicks or the Cavs in the round 1 and be like, all right, we're going to kick the shit out of this team anyway. Like they're just not going to care. They don't like Cleveland, New York, to a lesser extent, Boston, Milwaukee, all the teams that we think are ahead of them in the East should maximize the regular season as much as possible. Why did recent history tells us the Heat should not give an absolute shit as long as they're in fighting position to just then show up and kick ass.
Yeah, getting in the play-in tournament last year was their worst case scenario, right? And then they still went to the NBA Finals. So I think that they'll be better than they were in the regular season last year. I don't know if that's going to be more wins. Like statistically, they were not even a 44-win team. Like they were a bad team, right? And they won a lot of clutch time games. Like they were very good in clutch time. And Tyler Hero, by the way, was a big part of that. So, but also their 3-point shooting just went in the toilet. When the year prior, they were the best 3-point shooting team in the league by percentage. the reality is probably somewhere in the middle, right? I don't think that they're as bad as they were last year, and I don't think they're as good a 3-point shooting team as they were 2 years ago when they were the number 1 seed. So if that 3-point shooting just like kind of reverts back up to the mean a little bit more, that should just lead to a few more wins, I would imagine. But if the over-under is 46.5, I'll take the under. I think a lot of Heat fans would say, well, the team, like they'll cite the 3-point shooting numbers because that's a very popular number down here in Miami. And then like that year they won 53 games, right? So we're probably closer to the 53 games. My argument is since Jimmy Butler arrived in Miami, they won 44 games, 40 games, 53 games, and 44 games, right? They've basically been a slightly above 500 team for most of Jimmy Butler's time in the regular season, most of Jimmy Butler's stint in Miami. So this is not a team that I don't think that they figured out that the regular season doesn't matter. Like, again, they don't want to be in the play-in tournament. They would much rather be the number 1 seed than the 8th seed. But the goal should be, hey, let's just be healthy as possible, especially Jimmy and Bam. Be as healthy as possible getting into the playoffs, and let's just avoid having to do the play-in tournament thing because there's too much of a wild card there. So the answer is under. I don't know if I said that yet.
Yeah, under, and yet no one's going to want to see them in round 1.
Right. Under and scary.
Yeah, there's just they're the Grim Reaper waiting for you for your playoff hopes if you're a team with that isn't Milwaukee. Like even if you're Milwaukee, like honestly after last year, if we could get Milwaukee Heat round 1 again, I would quite enjoy that.
I'm good.
No,
I know it's more narrative this year, but I'm fine.
Can we just not
let
Damian Lillard play the Heat? Because I just don't want to deal with that, man. I really don't want to do it.
Fine. Heat Cavs, I can just bitch about how they messed up the Kevin Love thing for 3 weeks, put it into my headlines on podcasts, and if Wes comes to
Kevin Love sounds like a big that Jared Allen might actually be able to handle, Chris. So there you go.
You know what? Did you watch Kevin Love play against the Knicks? I don't think so.
Yeah, who knows?
One of those guys throws elbows when he rebounds. One of those guys doesn't.
It's your nightmare. I was just trying to give you some hope.
Look, I we'll see how Jared Allen does against Yusuf Nurkic, and then we can reevaluate this.
There we go. Sounds good.
All right, Wes. Any final Heat thoughts? Any random player we didn't name? Anything we didn't hit before we exit here?
Watch out for Orlando Robinson. They really like him. Would be watch out. You don't have to watch out for him. It's fine. But just if you need a 4th center on your fantasy team, maybe. I don't know. And I think they should trade for James Harden. So that's where I'm at.
Oh, way to drop that bomb at minute 47, Wes.
No, that's just doubling as a plug for his own show. That's okay. All that was.
Hear about that?
Listen to
hear more
Heat
about that on Locked On Heat. Yeah. No, they should. They should trade for James Harden. Just do it. Who cares?
Look, I want that because the spin jobs on Harden passing the conditioning test would be some all-time bullshit.
The hardest thing about this Heat team is that it's been basically the same team for 3 years in a row, and as reporters, it just sucks. I'm all right, these players are great, and I like them, and they're very nice, and they're very great to deal with. They honestly are great to deal with, from the front of the roster to the back of the roster. But Jesus Christ, it's just the same story. It's the same thing every single year. Kevin Love coming last year was the greatest thing ever. It was wow, a new person to talk to. This is great. And even when they did get a new guy, it was Josh Richardson who'd already been here.
Yeah, but is Josh Richardson being good again is peak? If Josh Richardson is good again in Miami, it's peak Heat culture's undefeated coming.
He's gonna start and play really well, and he's gonna shoot 38% from 3, and people are gonna be like, "Oh my God, why was this guy in New Orleans? This is crazy." I think it'll be a fine year for the Heat. I think they should trade for James Harden, and I don't know, whatever. Let's just get to the playoffs already. I don't care.
All right, on that note, all right, we're going to talk about WNBA playoffs and do our Lakers season preview coming up next. Thanks again to our guy Wes Goldberg for coming through to talk about the Jrue Holiday trade and the Miami Heat. Sure, we'll have Wes on again at some point. Feels like a lock, if I'm being honest. Turning our attention to the WNBA playoffs, Brendon, we have an NBA Finals matchup. We have a WNBA Finals matchup. Excuse me. We got what we all kind of wanted. I think I've seen Brendan some tweets being I'm bored by this series. Like, I'm sorry. This is the best two players in the world. This is the two super teams. There's the Jonquel Jones back in the finals factor. And I want to start with Jonquel Jones. The Liberty beat the Sun in a very competitive game in Connecticut on Sunday to advance and go through. And for a player, Brendan, that I think the first time we talked about her this year was that it wasn't totally clicking with her with the Liberty yet. It didn't totally feel like it worked yet. She was the driver of why the New York Liberty won this game and are headed to the finals.
And you could probably say the driver of why they achieved what they did this season, right? You know, I think Sandy Brondello, they say it on almost every broadcast when they get one-on-one time with the head coach of the Liberty, Sandy Brondello, that she has made no secret of the fact that their season turned around the All-Star break and the challenge that she issued to Jonquel to get double-digit rebounds. Like, if you've watched any WNBA games this year, you have heard that story told, and she answered that challenge. And today, 25, 15, and 4 blocks. Just unreal stuff. I do think that there was a little bit of emotion you could feel going against her former team in order to get back to the finals. That's a cool subplot of all of this. She was getting played incredibly physically by Alyssa Thomas, her former front court mate, and it's pretty admirable. I mean, I don't know if it's even crazy to say she's kind of the story of this season in the WNBA, if I'm being honest, because the team that had the biggest adjustment period and a strange start turned their season around because of her. Like, that is huge. And so she deserves a world of credit, and this team does too, because you could feel at times that they were going through this for the first time. There's nothing wrong with that, but at some point you kind of just need to execute the basics, rebound the ball, get easy, good shots, play good defense in order to win these tough games. And time and again, she was the one to kind of do that for them. So, yeah, very, very huge salute to her. And obviously this team winning a series that looked a little iffy after that game 1 loss, but we're getting the series we wanted. Anyone who pretends to want the Sun here, like, WNBA media has a little bit of a soft spot for the Connecticut Sun in a way that I don't fully understand. They've been in the finals, they've been in the conference or semifinals many times. We all respect this team. It is what it is, but come on, this is the clash we all wanted from January when they signed all their players.
We're gonna do, I think, a big WNBA Finals preview come Wednesday show because the finals don't start for a week, so we have a little bit of time to process it, dive into some things.
Yeah.
But just to hit on the Jonquel Jones thing again, 37 minutes, 7 of 14 from the field, 2 of 3 from 3, which is huge. 9 of 12 from the line, even bigger. 15 boards, 6 on the offensive glass. 6 offensive rebounds. That's huge. 25 points, 4 blocks, a steal, 2 assists. Here's the one concern I have. The Liberty, Brendan, I think the Aces are going to have more than a week off. The Liberty, I think, almost need the week off more. So here's the minutes they played in this game, which I think is going to be, to tip the hand a little bit towards the series preview, is a point of concern for me for both teams a little bit about like how long they can sustain some of these minute totals. Sabrina Escu played 38. Vandersloot played 38. Jonquel Jones played 37. Stewie and Laney played 40. Maria Johannes is just like not playing, and that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, it just doesn't. I understand if you're concerned about some defensive stuff with her. You're not getting anything from her. Thornton plays 4. Dolson plays 3. Maybe Dolson plays more against the Aces because they have Asia Wilson, and they'll just want some minutes to throw another big out there. You could probably get away with 2 bigs at certain points against the Aces, I would suspect.
Yeah, I think it's more a Stokes thing than an Asia thing.
Right. But it's just like they're playing these really, really heavy minutes, and I'm just kind of looking at this a little bit like, are we sure about that? Like the I think you should leave meme? That's me right now. Mm-hmm. Are we sure about that?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how much it affects them. I think at the same time, like, the WNBA playoffs have a lot of rest built in because they want to make sure travel does not become an issue, and they're also shorter than the NBA playoffs, right? So,
yes.
It's not 2 months of 40 minutes, 7-game series. It is 1 month of 3 and 5 game series, and a little more rest, I would say, on the whole, especially if you take care of business. So we'll see if that becomes a factor in the series. But on the Suns side, I think Alyssa Thomas does deserve a world of credit. I think Tiffany Hayes deserves a bunch of credit for the way she played in this series, frankly, too, because she was a big part of why their offense hummed, but also a big question mark. But Alyssa Thomas goes out in this game with, if you know her injury history and the fact that she has torn both of her labrums and you see an arm injury, you would be reasonable to assume some scary stuff is going on. But she comes back because she is a freak and has just always kind of waved her, Dikembe Mutombo finger at injuries. Just the entire concept of being hurt doesn't seem to really exist in the universe that Alyssa Thomas occupies. And also, I would say, and she had a triple-double. And then I would also tip my hat to Dejanay Carrington, who the story of game 3 was Dejanay Carrington getting into an argument with her teammates and everybody getting asked about it because the media loves nothing more than spats on the sidelines. And then she turns around after getting a couple DNPs and that whole storyline and scores 14 big points for this team when they really needed it. So if you look at why the Liberty couldn't play somebody or didn't think, I tend to agree with you that they could have played Johannes more, but why they didn't feel great about her or why Kayla Thornton didn't play a ton or why Courtney Vandersloot is not at her best in this series, it's because the big perimeter players on this team, whether it is Hayes or it is Carrington or it is Ty Harris, who made a couple of huge threes late, were good enough at the end of the day on both ends to really dictate the terms of the series, and that's huge. And it really was the Liberty having to overcome in order to win this, more so than them just kind of like wiping the floor with their opponent, which I think obviously is the case when you lose game 1 and have to eke out a couple victories. So yeah, they earned this one, and it's cool to see because we thought maybe there was a version of this season where the Liberty and Aces just cruised, and they definitely didn't. They were tested.
And I would say, I think this is the kind of series, this is the kind of trickery, the kind of adversity I think is good for a team like Liberty to go through. I mean, they kept repeating on the broadcast throughout the series how this team just came together, that this team was just put together in a lab, so to speak, in the summer. Yeah. And they're here, and they've had to go through some stuff. Like, I'm not like they didn't have any big injuries or anything like that. They didn't have, like you don't get like the months of kind of in the trenches stuff that you might get with the WNBA playoffs, but you got as close as I think you can get to that with the structure of the W playoffs. And I think this series in particular, it's like you took a punch in game 1. You didn't even get a great Stewie for much of the series. Like, at least offensively, you didn't get the peak Stewie.
Yeah.
And you come out on top and you win the last 3 in a row to go home and to take this home, and now you're in the finals. That's everything you could have wanted from the Liberty if this series was going to start the way it did.
Yeah.
Did you? The last thing I want to say, did you see the Skylar Diggins? We're gonna do a big season preview, but did you see the Skylar Diggins Smith tweet?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so I put it in our private chat in StreamYard where we record, but she tweeted at 6:07 p.m. October 1st, 2023. At SkyDig4. This is her real Twitter, which is harder nowadays. Thanks a lot, Elon Musk.
She also deactivated it for quite a while, so it was tenuous for a bit if you were getting the real version of her or if she was even present on that website.
Yeah. So she said, "Damn, it's almost like Sandy is a good coach." And with the emoji with the smiley face like melting into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean, for my money, Sandy Brondello is probably the most consistent and accomplished coach in the league. I think the versatility and adaptability she's shown as a head coach this year, we talked a lot early in the season about how the simplicity and getting kind of a little bit more basic with the offense went a long way for them as well as they tried to integrate with one another. And I think that's a testament to her. And I think creating a great defense basically from the jump with a roster that, even though there are parts of it, whether that's especially, 3 through 5 in the starting lineup that have some defensive acumen, Vandersloot, Sabrina, Dolson, Johannes, Niara Sabali, none of those players are proven defensive commodities, and they were able to play on a championship caliber defense despite that. So, yeah, this series is going to be fantastic, and I really do think a lot of it will come down to chemistry, continuity, coaching, some of that stuff, because the talent is as close to even as you could possibly get it, I think.
Move on to the real Lakers of Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Lakers, LeBron's team, the subject of a canceled HBO Max show, whatever. Jeannie Buss, by the way, was on. Brendan, I find it. I would love to know why Jeannie Buss was how she was like, "Hey, I'm good with going on the show on their official podcast at the end of season 2." Like, fascinating. Then to unpack the Jeannie Buss.
She looks good in that show.
Max.
So
yeah, it's just like her dad does not come across like super great.
it's admirable. There's too many scared celebrities and athletes these days. It's just like, what's the harm? It's a TV show, you know?
Yeah, also, just like, let's talk about things, you know? Let's just have some conversations.
Yeah, what's the harm? Like, John C. Reilly was goofing around. Okay, your dad looks like, you know, a little bit of an adulterer, a little bit of a, you know, asshole maybe, but like, whatever. He's not even around anymore, and I'd say his legacy looks pretty nice with all the rafters, how decorated the rafters are at Staples Center, right? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, he won.
Yes. All right, let's go to our season preview of those Lakers, starting with the most important player. Brendan, I'm just going to say it. It's LeBron James. Like, I'm sorry. Like, this team is still driven by LeBron. This team is still kind of going as far as LeBron can take it in a lot of ways. They need him to be healthy. They need him to be healthy when it matters. They need him to be able to sustain a very high level of play at a minutes total and an age that has just historically never been done. Mm-hmm. They need him to be something spectacular. If they're going to maximize this title window, maximize them getting there, maximize this season, it's kind of on LeBron's shoulders again in a way that I don't know if he really wants it to totally be at this point of the career, but I think just what AD is, what LeBron is, what the rest of the roster is, I really, really think you're in a spot where LeBron is still the most important player for these Lakers.
I don't agree. I don't think.
Okay, tell me.
I don't think
tell me why
last
I'm
year's
wrong.
team was. I don't think last year's team was driven by LeBron being at his peak.
I don't. Okay,
I think
shouldn't
this
say
is Anthony
peak.
Davis. I think that. No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't know if you did say peak. I don't think this team was where it was last year because of LeBron. I think there are moments like Game 4 against the Nuggets or the various points in, you know, 6-minute increments that he just turns it on, and of course is still a game-changing player. I think the way that they played defense might have been possible because of Anthony Davis, but it was also at its best because in part of LeBron and the way that he was just straight up like not even really guarding anybody at times in the playoffs and was just kind of as long as you don't fully lose track of anybody out there, you're allowed to just sag into the paint and try to create turnovers or be a helper at the basket or whatever. And then, of course, the offense, even though he was settling for jumpers quite a bit and all the rest, he showed that he still has a lot left. But this is a guy who had a significant injury down the stretch of the season, who you should expect to have a significant injury down the stretch of most seasons. And if you look at the on-off, in the playoffs, both LeBron and AD on, +4. LeBron on, Davis off, -11.
Mm-hmm.
AD on, LeBron off, +4. And then both off, which was only 45 minutes, but +13. So, to me, the way that Darvin Ham has put together this defense, the way that Rob Pelinka has put together the roster with a lot of defensive versatility and big perimeter forwards and wings that can guard multiple positions, they're going to go as far as their defense takes them, in my opinion, and as a result of that, they're going to go as far as Anthony Davis takes them. That's the case as I would make it.
I think that's a really good argument. I think you're probably correct. I just can't see a version of this season where they win the title and LeBron isn't able to carry the offense enough through that stretch run. If he needs to be healthy enough to get there. He just has to be healthy enough for him to get to
setting
that point.
health aside, because that is an obvious thing to say about the Lakers and LeBron and Anthony Davis. If they're both healthy, if they are both clearly playing the best basketball of their lives, which I think we would agree they probably have to do to leapfrog the teams that I think you and I both see as ahead of them. Let's say everything breaks right. Is LeBron the first best player on this team or the second, let's say most important, first or second most important player on the absolute pinnacle of what the Lakers can be this year? Health 100%, no issues. They both play 70 games. Where is the hierarchy? What's the pecking order? How's the value breakdown for you in that version of events? Because the health is like, of course.
Yeah, I would just say there's no way LeBron can play the best basketball he's ever played. That's just not going to happen again. That part
not
of it,
the best basketball he's ever played. The best basketball he's capable of.
Okay. I think like it's probably a D because I think he's going to have more two-way responsibility. I think that's I think part of it. I think I'm going to caveat myself. AD regular season, LeBron playoffs.
Okay. I think the what I will give you on the AD part is, despite the fact that I think he played one of his best postseasons and was just relentless getting to the basket, was relentless as a rebounder, made more of his mid-range shots at least in both the regular season and playoffs than he had the previous year and looked a little closer to his bubble self as a result of that, he did wear down. And so I do think like it's probably picking nits to even put one or the other ahead because I think, it's fitting we each picked one of them because I think the season doesn't max out unless both are awesome. But
if one of us had been like Caleb Martin, we would have been full of it. I think we just would have been. We're just forcing the issue.
Wait, Caleb Martin,
pick one of these two guys, or not Caleb Martin. I'm saying
Austin
if we hadn't
Reeves?
picked one of these, I'm just saying if we hadn't picked anyone that wasn't LeBron or AD, I think you're just like lying to yourself. That's my point.
Yeah. I think. Do you feel better about Davis's ability to be what we're talking about or what I'm making the case he has to be now than you did coming off of the previous season? Because I do think he kind of proved that the bubble wasn't a fluke. He can still do it, whatever it is. And also the chunk of the regular season that he had, too, especially with LeBron out. If I'm in the Lakers front office, I'm like, all right, like we're kind of back on track with Anthony Davis in a way that I think a lot of people wondered if we would ever get back to, frankly.
It is the most optimistic I have felt about him coming off the playoff run in a long time. No question, right? No question that this is the best I think I felt about AD since the end of the bubble. I don't think there's any debate that this is the most optimism I think anyone could have about AD right now.
Do you see them as we're going to get to best case and worst case, but I said that they're a little bit of a tier below. Do you think of them that way? Like, do you see them as like below Denver, below Phoenix? Is it equal?
Yes.
All three of them are in the same tier. How do you evaluate it?
My A+ tier would be Bucks, Celtics, Nuggets. That's my those are the three best teams in the league right now. Suns and Lakers and the Warriors probably are the next three in their own little conjunction. I think that's the tier, and I think I would have the Suns fourth, probably. I need to see it a little bit. Just need to see how it looks the first 50 games, 25 games before you see it. Warriors, again, you got to see the Chris Paul part of it, and Draymond's already twisted his ankle. Just like them to stay healthy, obviously caveat there. And then the Lakers, I think things could break for them in a way that opens the door, but I think they need a little bit of help in the way that the teams, particularly at the very, very top, don't need something to break in their direction.
All right. Who do you have as the guy we're going to be talking about at the end of the season?
The roster's a little bit tricky because I think the answer you could just go here is Austin Reeves.
I think there's
and
been plenty of Austin Reeves talk.
Well,
yeah.
that's my point. It's okay, you can't pick he's just on the freaking national team. So I don't have a good feel for this. I think it's my gut is I want to just pick one of the random young guys that's gonna pop, but I don't have a great idea of how to signal out is Jalen Hood-Schifino just gonna be good?
It's Max
right?
Christie if it's their young guys.
Yeah,
that's who I had.
So I go with him as well, just because it's the young guy that's actually been around a little bit longer. He's got the frame. but it is straight. This is straight projection. Like, to be clear, like anything we're picking here, 41 games last year, 12.5 minutes a game. Shot 42% from three. It's good, but it's like incredibly small sample sizes for him at the NBA level. Again, love the frame. They have a need for this kind of player, like desperately on this roster. But I think it's absolutely a little bit of projection. Good in summer league. I like what we saw in summer league, but I think
that's why I would say
here.
it's yeah, of course it is, but I think what he showed at summer league was probably one of the biggest standouts of the whole tournament. Frankly, like I think good at summer league almost kind of undersells it. Like he was pretty great at summer league. He had 19 assists to 11 turnovers, 55% from three. He was 18 of 39, so just under 50% from two, and getting to the basket, getting 31 free throw attempts in 160 minutes. A lot of really positive indicators that he's ready to break out. But, I mean, everything with the young guys is projecting until all of a sudden they're doing it. That's kind of the spirit of this category, right? It's like, who's the guy that hasn't done it that might? So I think if you're looking at this roster, to your point, it's like Rui, Reeves. We talked about those guys. They're not really breakout candidates. Torian Prince, like, okay, we know. Vanderbilt, we know. Like, there's some ifs and question marks with those guys, but it's not as if they're going to, like, blow things up, blow up out of nowhere. So I'm curious what you said that they desperately need a guy like this. What role do you think he could play if he does kind of break out? Because that was one of the things holding me back a little bit from naming him is I'm like, 3-and-D, like, I guess he has a little bit better defensive upside than Reeves, probably a better, more consistent shooter if he really breaks right than some of their other guys. But, like, I actually don't know what the pathway into the rotation is for him unless there's a trade. But what do you think?
I just think, like, shooting and eating minutes and being another option, just if and when some of these guys don't work out, like Cam Reddish might not be playable. Caleb Martin, like there could be some issues with this roster.
You keep saying Caleb Martin. He's not on this team.
Who am I?
You're thinking of the Heat because we talked about the Heat with Wes.
Yeah,
Gabe Vincent, different Heat player. Okay.
Yeah. Just my brain's fried. Like you can have the situation where like some of these guys just don't perform in the way you need them to. I look at Reddish. I look at this roster, and it's like, okay, are we sure 100% Torian Prince? And no, they're not exactly the same thing. But like this Torian Prince, like he was available on the cheap for a reason, right? Like it's not like any of necessarily these guys they've gotten are there. Or do they trade D'Lo? And like they're just like, okay, we need to plug in like guard minutes. Like you make some kind of trade that's a little more tilted for size. And all right, it's time for Max Christie stuff. There's always the NBA season will dictate something for you. Mm-hmm. That someone is going to have to step up and you don't expect it. And it's really hard for us to project like what that's going to look like, why it happens, even who it's going to be. But if someone like Christie is going to pop or at least get a run, it's because like he can shoot and he can eat minutes and he's got good size to like maybe guard a couple spots. That to me is projectable in a way that these other guys are not. Like I can't, like you could have been like, man, Jackson Hayes gets a real boost getting like playing with LeBron as his pick and roll ball handler. Like Reeves is what he is. I don't have any faith that this is finally where Cam Reddish is.
Yeah,
like
I don't think Reddish is going
to
play. So I think Christie's already ahead of him in the pecking order. It'll be interesting.
By the way, like Cam Reddish is. Just reminders.
I'm not sure. I mean, if they drafted him, so if it was, it would have been,
Yeah. So the other thing,
the
other thing I will just say, I think about Christie, just to reinforce to me that this is somewhat of a projection. Do you know how many G League games he's played?
I'm on his real GM page, but I think you said he played 41 in the NBA, so I don't think he was in the G League very much last year.
Played one. So it's just like the NBA minutes are not like.
Wait, I'm seeing
like
13.
His basketball reference page has one.
Basketball reference is weird with G League and like summer league and stuff like that. that is weird that it's such a big discrepancy. It's South Bay Lakers, 13 games played is what it says on Real GM, but his numbers are not great in those games either. So either way, I mean, 13 is not a lot. He had 387 total minutes, shot 29% from three. So like, you're not going to point to that to be like, this is the year.
No, okay. So the official G League site has 13 as well. Basketball Reference, love you, but please, I want to have one page. That should actually just be, honestly, the G League stuff should just be on like their page. They should just be like a carve out of like, this is their G League stats.
Basketball Reference has a lot more NBA numbers than anywhere else, but Real GM is nice because it does have it. It has college, international, G League, and NBA all in one place. It's actually funny with him, though, because if you do look at the college, he did not shoot well there either. So it would be a pretty big breakout for him to suddenly like be lights out from behind the arc.
If he is that, though, like that's also just the kind of role player that LeBron and AD need. And you could
it's like
see,
the KCP role, right? It's
yes.
It's that for what they were in the bubble. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting because they do sort of not need, but it would be nice if like one of the young guys kind of broke out between Hayes, Reddish, and Christie. It would just make them a little deeper, a little more frisky on both ends of the floor, a little less reliant on like Vanderbilt or Prince, like you said. But want to go to best lineup?
Yeah. I think this is pretty straightforward.
Okay, so last year in the regular season, because of the trades, no lineup played more than like 290 possessions together, I think was the most or so.
Yeah.
Like just shy of 300. But the best one did come after the deadline, which makes sense because that's when their season really turned around, and it was what you would guess. It was their starting lineup in the playoffs, which was Russell, Reeves, Vanderbilt, LeBron, Davis. But in the playoffs, their best actual overall lineup, even though it wasn't always their starting lineup, Schroeder, Reeves, Rui, LeBron, AD. So I think that's kind of the template. I agree with you. I didn't have to think crazy hard about this one, but I'll let you go first.
Reeves, Vincent, LeBron, pick one of your forwards. I would lean Rui for the offense, but I think you could tell me Vanderbilt is the right pick, and I wouldn't fight you too hard on it because it gives you some really good LeBron defensive cover, although, again, Rui played out of his mind last year, and then it's AD. The template here is to play really big, to be really big at guards, to trust Reeves' playmaking to grow, to trust Vincent as a guy that can play within the cog of this machine in the way he did in Miami, for LeBron to be LeBron, and to just have a really, really big front line and to be a bully of a team in that way and to lean into that and have AD at the 5, even with the other centers you got, to eat some innings and play with him at times, I'm sure. It's about AD at the 5, and it's about embracing what that offers you and pairing it with all this other size at the other spots. And D'Lo's going to have his role. I don't think he's in their best 5 when it comes down to it either.
No, I don't think so. The fact that Reeves took a leap and that they made a choice to replace Schroeder with Vincent makes me think they don't fully buy that. And as much as I mean,
he's on a tradable contract. Like he's pretty clearly on one of those deals that if it's traded in February, it's like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, which sucks for him. Like I do at a certain point feel for guys who he's really not as terrible as on defense as people like to make it out. His focus wanes. He doesn't play through screens very well, all that stuff. But like, there's a reason he just got $16 million. I think, he's one of those guys that gets talked about like he's just like a complete joke. And I think that does kind of suck for him, but they signed him for the purpose of trading him. Like we can just kind of be realistic at the same time. But my best lineup for the 2024 Los Angeles Lakers, I have Gabe Vincent as well. I think that he is going to be somebody who really just fills the shooter role, but ideally is a little bit of a better shooter, can pass it enough, not going to get into the paint the same way, but that's okay. I have Austin Reeves. I think that he is really, as he showed, exactly what this team needs as far as a tough bucket getter, a guy who can get to the free throw line. He can play within their defense enough to make it work. I have Rui Hachimura as well. I think I buy the shooting. I buy the fact that he is a competent offensive player. I think that was not a fluke. It was a breakout, but that doesn't mean it's not repeatable, and I think it will be. And I think his defense is actually pretty valuable to them too. LeBron James, of course, Anthony Davis, of course. Those guys are going to be the end-all, be-all for this team at the end of the day, but I like that 5 for them as far as carrying over their identity from last year and being able to get the job done on both ends for sure. I don't really know. I've seen some chatter on Lakers Twitter, Chris, about the idea of Taurean Prince potentially starting or closing. And I think the idea there is maybe if Rui just actually doesn't hit, that you kind of have insulation at that almost identical role, really. And I guess I can see that, but it already feels like if Rui is that disappointing so quickly, then you're kind of already screwed in a way. So I don't think I can convince myself on that one fully.
Yeah, Taurean Prince is there to give you different big wing options. He is not there to be like your best option to play that role.
Yeah,
you paid Rui, like to quote Mad Men. That's what the money is for. The money is for Rui to like be that dude.
Do you buy it? What we saw from him? I mean, what he did from the trade deadline through the end of the playoffs was something like just straight up we've never even come close to seeing from him.
I'm always a little skeptical of those like in-season turnarounds, but what I will say is that his willingness to chase that out speaks volumes to the possibility that it's real. I think if that just kind of like happened and it was just kind of like a fluke, you would kind of like know because it's like, oh, he's not really playing that way. It just kind of like happened, and it's more of like a numbers thing. When you watched him, it felt like it was a guy who was like actually in like a environment he was invested in, and in a team that was kind of invested in him, and he understood his role. And you will hear until forever NBA veterans talk about like you find your place in the league. And I'm paraphrasing various people. You find your place in the league when you figure out that like what your role is and accept that role. And if this is what that is, then I think there should be a lot of optimism that he can be something like he was last year.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I think the fact that he didn't play for Japan, like even something small like that, and he was pretty vocal about like, hey, I want to keep figuring this thing out in LA and getting better, and I will play in the Olympics, but I'm not going to go kind of waste my time at FIBA. Like that felt cool to me too. He obviously had the time away from the Wizards the prior season with mental health and whatever, and like, you know, if he's in a better place there, I think a lot of things align to feel like, you know, at some point it happens for guys, and I don't see why it couldn't have been that way for him. Best case scenario, I have a championship.
Same. It's the ceiling is there. Is it the likeliest opportunity here? But a championship is the best case for this team. Worst case is go ahead.
I like how they match up with the Suns. That's what I was going to say. I think that they are a team that has the physicality, size, and if the Suns are able to just make it kind of a shootout, I think that's where it gets ugly. But I don't really think the Lakers are going to let teams make game shootouts. I think that their defense is just pretty real. So I think that that's a team that they could actually give some trouble to. So I don't hate you saying that they're on the same tier. I kind of do. You know, watch out. You know, there might be some sort of explosive in your mailbox or something at some point for that comment. But otherwise, I hear you. I think that they do match up well. The Nuggets, kind of a different story. But, you know, it's a conversation for a different time. Worst case, I just had another year lost to injuries. Oh, did you want to respond to the explosive? Did you want my death threat there? Did you want to address that?
You know, I was gonna just say wait until you hear how Brendan. Just, you know, I'm pretty much like ready to like bury the Cavs when we get to the preview a little bit.
Okay. All right. So I can't do any more damage to you than your team has already done. Is that what you're saying?
No. Here's the thing. That's not the. If you were gonna hurt me, you would like get the English like football association, the FA, to like give Liverpool back the points from the weekend. That would hurt me.
Okay.
So
you're just detached. You're cruising.
Yeah, like that's not the thing that can emotionally wound me.
Okay.
If you're like, I actually think Kobe is better than LeBron, then like we might not be friends anymore.
Well, our video editor and social media Hype Man can address that separately with you.
He's wrong. He's wrong if it's his belief. But worst case is injuries, and then they end up in like the play-in again and have to like muck through it. Because then there's 0% chance they're ending up as like the 7th seed and like pulling this off. They are in this weird spot where they need LeBron to like almost like play a ton, and for them to maximize the regular season so they don't have this like the hardest path possible in the playoffs.
They are definitely a team where we talk about a lot in this, era of the NBA and whatever, that the regular season has kind of been discounted and this and that. But I think, they should absolutely chase a high seed, and the fewer games that they have to go through in order to make another finals or a conference finals would go an incredibly long way. I'm looking it up now. This team was a 43-win team with the expected win of 42 last year, but after the All-Star break, they were as good as the second best net rating team in the NBA, which is your Cleveland Cavaliers, and they were a 51-win team. So, the post All-Star break Lakers were like a 50-win team.
Yeah, they're good.
And so another season of playing together, a deeper roster. I think if they even get decent health from their superstar players, like a higher seed is definitely within reach, and they should chase it. I would advocate for them playing their guys and really valuing the regular season in a way that I might not otherwise, which is why I went over 47.5. What did you have?
I'm going over as well. I think this team is good enough. I think, again, health provided, there's not really a reason this team should win between like 50 and 53 games. And I think even if LeBron like only plays like 65, they could still pretty reasonably do this with the other talent they have. Like AD plus the talent they have is enough to beat a lot of crappy teams in the NBA.
Yeah, I think the one thing you would say is there's no replacing Davis, but they don't exactly give you a lot of faith that when Davis inevitably misses some number of games, even if it's not a ton, that they will suffer. They don't have another defensive center on the roster. They don't really have a front court rotation to be excited about. Christian Wood is a big wild card, I guess. If he finally hits, 8 years into his career, then things could look different. But yeah, the Davis injury caveat has to be there, as does the LeBron one. But I still like the over because they turned it around, but it's not exactly like LeBron and AD were like a picture of health last year.
No, and I don't think you can ever assume they're going to be a picture of health.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying is like they were still solid enough post
really
All-Star
good.
break
Yeah.
and overall, despite a season like that. So even if you guess that happens again, I kind of trust them to kind of adapt and figure that out in a way, again, kind of like we were saying with Davis overall, that I would have worried about prior to kind of them proving it. So, yeah, this team's going to be one of my favorites to watch, I think, this year.
Top 3 team that gets annoyed by the NBA's rest policy, the Los Angeles Lakers.
I think their actual injury history with both of their stars, and the fact that they're the Lakers and LeBron James is one of the stars, kind of think the NBA is going to let them.
So some PPE loans is what the PPE loans to cover the fines is what you're telling me.
Maybe, but I'm saying probably no fines. I'm saying, the league probably lets them do their thing because it's like Anthony Davis is an actual health risk, as is LeBron, and, you don't want to mess with that. But
all I ask is I get LeBron in Cleveland after Thanksgiving, then if you want to take off a month, go ahead, my guy. Live your life.
Yeah, let's get him for opening. I think they play opening night against the Suns. Let's see how that goes.
Let's get
That's
that.
fun.
Yeah, let's get that. Let's get like a good 6-8 weeks. Get the first month out of the way. Then it's like okay, back to Dennis Schroeder's doctor in Germany for like a week.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. All right, let's end there. It's been the Just Basketball Show for October 2nd. I'm Chris Manning. That's Brendon Kleen. Back at you later this week with more season previews, WNBA Finals preview, and maybe more. I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll get some other just random trades, or we're surely going to get.
Where's
at least
Malcolm
one out of
Brogdon
pocket.
going? Everybody's waiting with bated breath.
Yes. Honestly, useful player for a team that wants to give up a first. Also, we're gonna get some out of pocket media day comments, Brendan. Someone's gonna say something weird.
A lot of money on Joel Embiid. Whatever his odds are on the out of pocket media day comments, put some money on Joe because it's happening.
Yeah, nuke that on your betting app of choice. All right, talk to you all later this week.